You have been feeling a pull towards stillness that you cannot fully explain. Not exhaustion, not sadness, not the ordinary tiredness that comes from a difficult week. Something more deliberate than that, a quality of internal knowing that says, slow down, stop adding, stop pushing, stop trying to resolve what does not yet need to be resolved. And you have been resisting it, or half obeying it, or feeling guilty about it. Because the world around you is still moving at its ordinary pace, and you do not have a framework for why your inner world is asking for something different. That framework is what this transmission exists to give you. Stay with every word of what follows. We are Ashtar Command. We are a collective operating in service to the evolution of consciousness on this planet. And we are transmitting through this window with a specific intention that we want to name clearly before anything else is received. We are not here to add to the noise of urgency that already moves through your field. We are here to do the opposite. We are here to give you precise language for something your body already knows. Something that has been communicating itself to you through the pull towards stillness, through the sense that something important is in the process of completing itself inside you, through the specific quality of restlessness that comes not from lack of direction, but from being at the threshold of a genuine inner reorganization. The eclipse passage that is moving through your collective field right now is not a dramatic event. It does not arrive with sound and light. It arrives as contrast, a deepening of the difference between what is true in your life and what is no longer true but has not yet been acknowledged. And in that deepened contrast, several things that you have been carrying for longer than is comfortable to admit become suddenly, gently, and unmistakably ready to be put down. Stay with every word of what follows. What we are about to transmit is not general spiritual guidance. It is a precision map for this specific window. And the difference between receiving it as useful intelligence and letting it pass as beautiful language will be determined entirely by what you choose to do with what arrives in the next 30 minutes. The eclipse passage that is currently moving through the energetic field of your planet is not causing your evolution. Ashtar Command wants that to be clear from the beginning, because the misunderstanding that astronomical events cause spiritual change produces a kind of passive waiting that is the opposite of what this window is actually designed to. Activate. The eclipse is not the source of what you are feeling. The eclipse is an illuminator. It acts the way a light source acts when it is moved to a new angle inside a room, not changing the objects in the room, but changing what is visible, what casts a shadow, and what was hidden in the space behind things that the ordinary angle of light did not reach. What the eclipse illuminates is what was already there, what has been accumulating, what has been ready, sometimes for months or years, and has been waiting for a quality of internal visibility that would allow you to see it with enough clarity to act. What it specifically illuminates, for the category of soul drawn to this transmission, is this: the things you are still carrying that are no longer yours to carry. This is not a dramatic concept, it is a practical one, and it is worth sitting with the full weight of it before the transmission moves forward. Because the recognition that something is ready to be put down is different from the willingness to put it down. And the willingness is what this window is specifically designed to strengthen. What are the things you carry that are no longer yours? They are not always painful. That is the first thing to understand. Some of them are quietly exhausting precisely because they have become invisible. They have been present for so long that your system has adapted its baseline to accommodate them, the way the body adapts to a chronic low-grade tension, and eventually stops registering it as tension and registers it instead as normal. Agreements that ended in everything but their formal acknowledgement. Threads of connection held open out of kindness, long after the actual thread of shared direction had completed itself. Postponements of a simple, honest sentence that kept getting pushed forward because the timing was never quite right. And then more time passed, and the simple sentence became complicated by its own delay, and now speaking it feels like an event rather than a communication. Stories about a situation or a person or yourself that have grown larger than the actual events that generated them, requiring continuous energy to maintain. Drawing from your field at a rate that would surprise you if you could see it clearly. These are what the eclipse is illuminating. Not to shame you for carrying them. It's to show you, with the specific clarity of increased contrast, that you do not have to. But the part that most of you have not yet received, the part that changes everything about what this window makes possible, is still ahead. Do not leave now. Ashtar Command wants to address something that is almost certainly present in your experience right now as you receive this transmission. Something that creates resistance to the very completion this window is designed to support, and that must be named clearly before the practical guidance can land with the weight it carries. This is the belief that completing something means abandoning someone, that finishing means failing to love. That clarity is harshness. That honesty, delivered without excessive softening, is a form of unkindness. This belief is the single most consistent obstacle Ashtar Command observes in sensitive souls at the level of awakening reached by those drawn to this message. And it is worth examining directly, because it has been protecting something that no longer needs protection. You are empathic. You feel the subtleties of other people's emotional states with an accuracy that sometimes makes your own needs invisible to you. And because of that sensitivity, you have often tried to complete things in a way that protects everyone's comfort simultaneously, and found that this strategy, however well-intentioned, produces not the protection of comfort, but the indefinite extension of ambiguity, both for you and for the other person, because the clarity you withheld to protect them was also the clarity they needed to move forward. Ambiguity, held open out of kindness, is not kindness. It is a kindness to yourself. It delays the discomfort of the honest moment. And the honest moment, the one you have been circling, is almost always less difficult than the accumulated weight of circling it has been. What Ashtar Command is about to transmit is the operational difference between a life that continues to leak energy into incompleteness and a life that suddenly has the resources to build what you came here to build. This is the part of this transmission that moves from understanding into instruction. Stay present for this. What follows is specific. Ashtar Command has been observing the specific patterns most active in the field of souls drawn to this transmission throughout this eclipse window. And there are 3 categories of incompleteness that are showing up with the most consistent frequency, not because they are the only things ready to complete, but because they are the ones generating the most quiet drain on the energy resources you need for the next phase of what you are building. The first is the unspoken truth, not deception, not dishonesty in the conventional sense, but the honest thing that was postponed because you wanted the timing to be perfect, or because you wanted circumstances to change on their own so you would not have to introduce the discomfort of truth into a relationship that was functioning adequately on the surface. The unspoken truth can be a gratitude that never landed in words because you assumed the other person knew. It can be a need you never voiced because voicing it felt like an imposition. It can be a limit you need to name, clearly, kindly, once, so that the same correction does not have to be made again and again in the exhausting dynamic of never quite being direct enough for the understanding to hold. The unspoken truth is drawing from your field every time the situation it belongs to arises in your awareness, and it will continue to draw until the truth lands, briefly, gently, without the over-explanation that turns a simple, honest sentence into a performance of your own discomfort. This eclipse favors speaking one unspoken truth, gently, once, without the armor of elaborate framing. The second category is the enlarged story. This is where a real situation has become considerably bigger than its actual dimensions, because it has been serving a secondary function, protecting your identity, or your image of being right, or your image of being the one who always holds things together, or your image of being beyond the kind of ordinary human difficulty that this particular situation represents. Every human develops these enlarged stories, and every human develops them for understandable reasons. Because identity is the structure through which a human being navigates the uncertainty of being alive. And any challenge to that structure feels, at the level of the nervous system, like genuine threat. But the cost of an enlarged story is significant. It requires continuous maintenance. It prevents genuine contact with the people inside the narrative. And it draws from your energy field at precisely the rate you need that energy for the work you came here to do. What the eclipse contrast offers is simple. It shows you the actual size of the situation, not harshly, not as punishment, simply as information. The situation is almost always smaller than the narrative that formed around it, and when you allow the situation to return to its actual size, the relationship inside it often becomes accessible again, and what felt irresolvable reveals itself as a simple misunderstanding, sitting just behind two honest sentences that have never been spoken. The third category is the substitute topic. This is where you have been discussing something adjacent to the real issue, because the real issue felt too tender to name directly. People discuss schedules when the actual issue is closeness. People discuss logistics when the actual issue is trust. People discuss being busy when the actual issue is devotion. What they are devoted to, and whether the devotion is mutual, and whether the relationship has the kind of honesty it would need to survive the answer. The substitute topic is a form of care, not a form of deception, but it keeps both people in the conversation from being able to address what actually needs addressing. And the cost of the substitute topic, accumulated across months, is a relationship that feels increasingly opaque, where genuine contact is harder and harder to find. Precisely because the real conversation has never happened. This eclipse favors naming the true topic, softly, without making anyone wrong for having participated in the avoidance of it.
Because the avoidance was usually mutual.
And usually came from the same place, the genuine desire to protect something that mattered. Ashtar command wants to be precise here, because the word completion carries connotations of drama, of confrontation, of a conversation that produces the kind of clarity that leaves more damage than it heals. That is not what is being asked for. The completion that this window supports is of a different and quieter order entirely. A completed apology looks like this. You name what happened, you name your understanding of its impact, and you name one specific change you will embody going forward, without drowning the other person in the performance of your own self-examination, and without the elaborate explanation that turns the apology into a conversation about your feelings rather than about theirs. It is shorter than you think it needs to be. It is more powerful than you think brevity can make it. A completed boundary looks like this. You are specific enough and kind enough that the other person does not have to guess where the line is. And you do not have to keep correcting the same misunderstanding because the limit was stated so indirectly that it could not be held. The kindness and the clarity are not in tension with each other. They are the same gesture. A completed decision looks like this. The choice becomes real in your world. An email sent, a plan revised, a commitment made, a calendar adjusted, a conversation had, so that the decision is lived rather than merely contemplated. Because contemplated decisions draw as much energy from your field as enacted ones, and produce none of the spaciousness that follows genuine completion. The decision that lives only in your mind is still working. It is still drawing. It will continue to draw until it lands in form. Stopping is when you withdraw your energy from something but leave the thread still attached. Finishing is when you complete the cycle with genuine respect, so that the energy can return to you fully. And the other party is released with clarity, rather than with the peculiar ambiguity of a connection that is over in everything but its official acknowledgement. The distinction matters because only finishing returns the energy. Stopping does not. If you have stayed with this transmission until now, Something in you has already identified which of these three categories is most active in your life right now. You do not need to search for it. It has already made itself known. The question is not where the incompleteness lives. The question is what finishing actually looks like. And that is precisely what Ashtar command transmits next. Stay with this. There is one completion that Ashtar command identifies as especially potent for the particular category of soul drawn to this transmission, because it restores a specific quality of inner trust that no external relationship can provide and that no external accomplishment can replace. It is the completion of a small promise to yourself. Many of you have been carrying tiny self-promises for years. Not painful, exactly, but always present, like stones in your pockets that you have grown so accustomed to that you no longer notice the weight until the moment you put them down. I will create again. I will rest properly, without guilt. I will speak my needs without apologizing for having them. I will choose what actually matters over what merely demands my attention. I will stop making myself smaller than I actually am in the rooms where it costs me something real to do so. These promises were not made casually. They were made from a genuine recognition of what you needed to become. And they have been waiting, some of them, for a very long time. For a window that made keeping them feel possible rather than aspirational. This eclipse window is that window. Ashtar command does not ask you to keep all of them at once. The instruction is more precise than that. Choose one. Make it small enough to be real in the next 7 days. 15 minutes with a notebook. One early night without the guilt of still being awake when the rest of the house is quiet. One honest sentence, spoken without the qualifier that immediately follows it and softens it into something that can be safely ignored. One step, a single, specific, small, real step toward the thing you have been circling. When you keep a promise to yourself, you rebuild the inner trust that makes every other form of trustworthiness possible. Because the foundation of a life that works is a self that trusts its own word. And the foundation of a self that trusts its own word is evidence, accumulated in small, real, specific moments that the word is kept. What comes in the next minutes addresses the pattern that Ashtar command identifies as the source of more unnecessary suffering in sensitive souls than almost any other pattern in the field. If you have ever felt that you understand exactly what you need to change and cannot seem to actually change it, that the gap between your insight and your lived reality has become its own form of quiet despair, what follows is for you specifically. Pay close attention. This changes the framework. The most consistent pattern Ashtar command observes in awakening souls is this. You will often feel the truth of something before you have lived it. You will often recognize the next step inwardly, clearly, specifically, without doubt, before your life has reorganized itself around that recognition. And in the interval between the recognition and the reorganization, many of you respond with one of two forms of unkindness toward yourself. Either you strain against the interval and try to force your life into alignment with your insight at a pace that exceeds what embodiment can actually sustain, or you use the interval as evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with you, and withdraw into a postponement that masquerades as patience, but is actually avoidance wearing patience as clothing. Ashtar command names this the lag between insight and embodiment, and the first thing to understand about it is that it is not a problem. It is a rhythm. Insight and embodiment do not land in the same moment, and the interval between them is not evidence of weakness or resistance. It is the natural time required for a new understanding to move from recognition into form, the same way that a seed requires an interval between planting and emergence. And the interval itself is not failure, it is process. The response Ashtar command recommends is this. Allow yourself to recognize what is true. Make one clean small move toward living it. and then hold the interval between the recognition and the full reorganization with the specific quality of patient confidence that a skilled farmer holds between planting and harvest. Not anxious, not inactive, but tending consistently to the conditions that support the outcome you have already committed to. The move does not need to be large. In fact, the move that is small enough to be consistent is always more valuable than the move that is significant enough to feel momentous but cannot be sustained. The practical tool Ashtar Command offers for working with repeating patterns in your life is this. Instead of trying to resolve a pattern completely, upgrade it by 1 notch. Not 10 notches, not a full reinvention of your approach. 1 notch, 1 increment of improvement, chosen specifically, applied consistently, until it becomes the new default. If you tend to over-explain when a simpler sentence would serve better, practice 1 cleaner sentence per day. Not all of them. 1. If you tend to delay your own creative projects until conditions are perfect, practice 1 small act of creation in imperfect conditions. Not a complete body of work. 1 act. If you tend to avoid the conversations that matter most, practice speaking 1 gentle truth a little earlier than you would have, before the weight of postponement makes it feel impossible. Not every difficult conversation. 1. If you tend to give beyond your own capacity and then feel resentful of the demand, practice 1 respectful limit that protects your time and your energy, without an apology that immediately dismantles the protection. This approach is genuinely loving because it honors the actual pace of human embodiment. Real change does not happen through the dramatic gestures that feel significant in the moment, but cannot be sustained beyond the initial surge of resolution energy. Real change happens through small upgrades applied consistently until they become the new normal. And the new normal, accumulated across months, produces a transformation so complete that the people in your life notice something different about you without being able to name exactly what changed. That is embodied change. That is the only kind that holds. The patterns most worth applying the 1-notch principle to in this specific window are the ones that have returned more than twice in your life. The themes that come back in different forms and different relationships, but with the same fundamental quality, as if the same lesson is arriving at your door in new clothing each time. These patterns are not evidence of failure. They are evidence that you are being trained in something important, and that the training is continuing because the depth available in that theme exceeds what previous cycles were able to access. Each return of the pattern is not the same step on flat ground. It is the same shape of step on a higher floor, meaning the view from where you are now and the quality of choice available to you now exceeds what was available the last time. The recurrence is not evidence that you are stuck. It is evidence that you are climbing. Ashtar Command also wants to speak to the creative lives present in this transmission, because creation is one of the most direct means through which higher light enters human form. And creative cycles follow exactly the same stair pattern as every other cycle of growth. Inspiration rises and rests. Vision arrives in waves. The quality of creative output varies with the quality of the inner conditions in which it is produced. And the specific soul drawn to this transmission often treats creativity as something that must justify its own existence before it is allowed to occur, which means the creative act is placed behind a condition that is rarely fully met, and the creative energy that was meant to move through you accumulates instead. And what began as potential becomes weight. The 1-notch upgrade for creative life looks like this. Stop waiting for the perfect conditions that signal it is finally safe to create, and start treating consistent small acts of creation as the actual devotion, the actual spiritual practice, the actual means by which your gifts move from potential into form. If you have been waiting for a perfect mood, let the 1-notch upgrade be this. Create in an imperfect mood, briefly, without requiring the output to justify the effort. If you have been hiding your work until it reaches a standard of flawlessness that keeps receding ahead of you, let the upgrade be this: share something small that is sincere. And let sincerity replace flawlessness as the standard. Sincerity is more powerful than polish. It always has been. And the soul drawn to this transmission knows this, but knowing it and living it are separated by exactly the lag we described earlier. The one notch this week is to close that gap by one increment in one real specific act. The final piece of this transmission, the one that makes everything else make sense, arrives now. Ashtar Command wants to speak directly to something that has been present beneath the surface of this entire message and that has not yet been named explicitly. It is the reason the pull towards stillness that opened this transmission is not something to resist or feel guilty about. It is the specific permission this window is offering. Receive this. The pull towards stillness you have been feeling is not avoidance. It is preparation. Ashtar Command wants to be precise about the distinction because the two can feel identical from the inside. And the confusion between them is what generates the guilt and the self-doubt that accumulate when a soul chooses, correctly, to slow down before a genuine inner reorganization. And then interprets that choice as a failure to be productive, a failure to keep up, a failure to perform the continuous forward motion that the external world rewards. The slowdown is for the integration that has been waiting. It is for the completion of things that cannot complete themselves while you are moving. Some things require stillness to resolve, not meditation necessarily, not formal practice, but the specific quality of reduced external demand that allows the inner process to run at the pace it requires, without being constantly interrupted by the noise of adding and doing, and producing and managing. The inner process is real. It has a timeline, and it does not wait indefinitely. It will find the stillness it requires one way or another. And it is considerably more useful to choose the stillness than to have it arrive through the forced stop of exhaustion or illness or collapse. The slowdown is also for the honest accounting that this eclipse window is specifically designed to support. You cannot do the honest accounting while moving at full speed. The enlarged stories become visible in stillness. The unspoken truths become speakable in stillness. The substitute topics become recognizable in stillness, because stillness removes the distraction of motion and shows you the actual landscape of your inner life, rather than the blurred version that speed produces. Give yourself permission for this, not indefinitely, not as an escape from the life you are building, but for the specific duration of this window, 7 days, perhaps a little more, as the deliberate creation of conditions in which what is ready to complete can complete, and what is ready to begin can find the space in which to become real. When you come out of the window, when the integration has run its course and the inner reorganization has settled into its new configuration, you will not be slower. You will be more available, more coherent, more able to bring the full weight of your actual capacity to what you have chosen to give your energy to. The stillness is not the destination. It is the preparation for the next genuine movement. Before this transmission moves into its final phase, Ashtar Command wants to address a question directly. One that arises consistently in the field of sensitive souls who have been engaged with their own growth for long enough to have noticed a specific and uncomfortable pattern. The question is, why does the same thing keep coming back? Why, after years of genuine inner work, do the same themes return? The same relational dynamics, the same creative blocks, the same pull towards smallness in certain specific contexts? That question deserves a precise answer, and the answer changes the quality of how this window can be used. Stay. The answer to why the same themes return is not the one your inner critic offers. The inner critic says, because you have not yet dealt with it, because you are stuck. Because despite all of your effort and your commitment and your years of reaching for understanding, something fundamental has not changed, and the return of the theme is the proof. That answer is wrong. not partially wrong, structurally, consequentially wrong in a way that is directly responsible for the specific exhaustion many awakening souls carry. The exhaustion not of effort, but of conclusion. The exhaustion of believing that recurrence means failure. The actual answer is this. The theme returns because you are at a higher floor. Because the version of you that faces this theme now has capacities that the version of you who faced it last time did not. Because the depth available in this theme exceeds what any previous cycle was equipped to access, and the theme knows, at the level at which themes know things, that you are now ready for the layer it was always preparing you to reach. The return is not a verdict on your progress. The return is confirmation of it. Every time a familiar pattern returns, ask this instead. What is different about who I am now compared to who I was the last time this arrived? What can I see now that I could not see before? What can I choose now that was not available to me before? What can I say now, clearly and kindly, and without the old armor, that I did not have the inner steadiness to say in previous cycles? The pattern returned because you are ready for the next layer of it. And the next layer, approached with the understanding that this transmission is now given you, is not a repetition, it is a completion. This eclipse window is the completion, the unspoken truth, spoken once, gently, without the over-explanation. The enlarged story, allowed to return to its actual size. The substitute topic, named softly, with kindness for everyone who participated in the avoidance of it. The small promise kept. One, specific, real, this week. These 4 things, done with love in the days of this window, will produce a spaciousness in your inner life that you will be able to feel immediately. Space that was previously occupied by the maintenance of incompleteness returning to you as creative energy, as clarity, as the specific quality of inner quiet that is not emptiness but readiness. That space is not nothing. That space is everything the next phase of your life requires to begin. The beings who have stayed with this transmission through its full length are the ones whose systems were ready for exactly this level of operational clarity. You did not need comfort. You needed a map. And you stayed because something in you recognized that the map was here. Leave the word complete in the comments below if one of the 3 categories, the unspoken truth, the enlarged story, the substitute topic, resonated immediately when it was named. Leave the word ready if you feel something in your field has already begun to reorganize simply from receiving this framework. Your words in this space are not small. They are the signal that finds the next being who needs this transmission and does not yet know it exists. Ashtar command closes this transmission with a message that is not addressed to the soul who is waiting for the right moment to begin the completions this window makes possible. It is addressed to the soul who has already recognized in the receiving of this transmission what is ready, who already knows which truth is unspoken, who already knows which story has grown larger than its events warrant, who already knows which substitute topic has been standing in for the real conversation for longer than is necessary, who already knows which promise to themselves has been waiting long enough to be kept. That recognition is not preparation for action. It is the action. The decision, made clearly and without the elaborate architecture of planning that turns simple choices into complex projects, is the first completion this window is asking for. Everything else follows from the clarity of that decision. The sentence does not have to be perfect. The boundary does not have to be comprehensive. The creative act does not have to be significant. The promise does not have to be large. It has to be real. It has to be made in the full weight of your actual intention, without the qualifier that dilutes it, and without the delay that postpones it into a future that never quite arrives. The souls drawn to this transmission are not here by chance. You carry specific capacities for clarity, for compassion, for the kind of honest and gentle movement through the world that does not announce itself, but simply demonstrates, through the quality of one lived human life, what is possible when a soul chooses alignment over performance and truth over the management of appearances. Those capacities are ready for the next level of expression, not in some abstract future state, in the specific choices you make in the days surrounding this eclipse passage, in the specific completions you allow this week, in the small, real, one-notch upgrades you commit to in the ordinary daily texture of a life that is becoming, steadily, quietly, and irreversibly, more fully aligned with what you actually are. The light has already won. What remains is for you to live as if you know that. One clean completion, one spoken truth, one kept promise, one patient step toward living what you already know. That is all this window requires of you. And that, done with love, is everything. We are Ashtar Command. Welcome home. If this transmission gave you the framework your system has been waiting for, if the pull towards stillness you have been feeling finally has a name and a purpose, then there is one thing that matters right now. There is a transmission in this sequence that goes directly into what comes after the completions this window initiates. What opens, what becomes possible, what the inner space that returns to you is actually for. It is the next one. Click on it now. Not because it is convenient, because the part of you that recognized what was true in this transmission already knows it is the next piece.